Welcome back once again to Union Smack. Winter is setting in, the weather is changing, but the one thing that never alters is that we are here once again with your NXT UK Omnibus, looking at episodes 58 to 61. But before we continue, Travis is obviously not here. I am going solo once again. He is doing the alternative, the new AEW weekly show, along with Colin. Go and check that out on the channel. I'm assuming it will be up before you hear this. It has been a long, very odd week, but before we get into it, as usual, you can find me on Twitter at The Perfect Tenant. You can find Travis on Twitter at The Hibiki TMD. You can go to our online shop, unionsmack.bigcartel.com, where you can buy the official Union Smack shirt, the official Hibiki TMD shirt, the official Reset Button shirt, the official Tenant Talk shirt, the official Union Smack Hall of Fame shirt, and we may have one or two more items pop up closer to the Christmas period. Now, just like last time, there will be no news section. You can hop onto the channel and go and check out Issue 2 of Tenant Talks for all the latest up-to-date news on NXT UK and European wrestling. Issue 3 will be out sometime after October the 6th, after my birthday, once I've been on my travels once again and got back, recorded it and put it all together, which takes about a week now because of work. So without further ado, we shall get straight into it with our NXT UK Omnibus review. It's been a while, I may be a bit rusty, but let's give it a go. NXT UK episode 58. We are going pre-Takeover Cardiff here. If you want to check out our Takeover Cardiff post-show, then you can do so on the channel now. But this episode fell just out of our deadline for our last Omnibus. So we're going to include it here. This is pre-takeover, so we won't spend long on it. We will just rattle through this and then look at Cardiff in further detail. Do strap yourselves in. It's always a lengthy ride on these omnibuses, but we watch, so you don't have to. So without further ado, NXT UK episode 58 began with Ilya Dragunov versus Tyson T-Bone. This was a exhibition match, a squash match if you like, to get Dragunov back on track after that loss to Cassius Ohno, which you can hear all about in our last Omnibus review. There wasn't much to this. T-Bone didn't do a lot at all. He knocked Dragunov out with a punch, worked the arm that Ohno injured in their main event match a few weeks before. He had a decent half-and-half release suplex, but this was all Ilya Dragunov. All to make him look strong, to set him up for Cesaro at TakeOver, so Cesaro could knock him back down again. Nice standing senton here. A great counter of a big boot with a ripcord. Very, very nice. Clothesline, they're all impactful, you can hear each shot. Lovely deadlift German by Dragunov to get T-Bone up, and he wins with the Torpedo Moscow. There's not really much to say about this match apart from Tyson T-Bone doesn't belong in an NXT UK ring anymore. He's enhancement talent, the same as Ashton Smith and Saxon Huxley and the rest of them. I understand why they keep employing him, but there are far better and more worthy contenders now for the role of enhancement talent who you could get a good 10, 15 years out of. T-Bone's going nowhere, let's make no mistake about it. He's here just to put over the bigger stars. We get a video package of Tony Storm's championship reign thus far. It's amazing they managed to get this much out of the video package, to be honest, because there isn't much of the reign at all that is worth looking back on. It begins in Blackpool with her winning the championship, her defending the championship against Ginny and Nina Samuels, and then we get into the storyline with Kaylee Ray heading into NXT UK TakeOver Cardiff. Jack Gallagher is backstage. He speaks on his match with Cassius Ohno, which was absolutely weeks ago. We are talking May. We're talking May. This was August. So he has clearly been harbouring a grudge against Cassius Ohno for 3 months. If you don't remember, then in their match, Cassius Ohno knocked him out, but Jack Gallagher's foot was under the rope. The referee counted the pinfall anyway, and Cassius Ohno happily moved it after the 3 count was made. So Gallagher's been hanging on to this for 2 to 3 months now. It baffles me why this has suddenly become an issue. Why NXT UK didn't capitalise on this sooner, because who cares? Who actually cares about this feud now? I don't care about Jack Gallagher versus Cassius Ohno. If this had been 2 weeks after the match had happened, then I could have bought into it. But you're not going to tell me that Jack Gallagher has been competing on 205 Live and just not bothered to come to NXT UK to settle the score with a man who cheated him out of a victory. It's unbelievable. So I appreciate that they want to do something with Jack Gallagher, especially with, the impending doom of 205 Live, depending on who you listen to. But too little, too late right now. Joseph Connors versus Oliver Carter. And you can hear the excitement in my voice talking about Joseph Connors. I have no idea why this guy is still employed. I say it every month when we do these omnibuses now. He has to be one of the most boring, banal workers I've ever seen. And they've repackaged him 2 or 3 times. Nothing's worked. And now they've sort of gone back to the Joseph Connors who wants to put an end to new and up-and-coming stars in NXT UK. I heard someone the other day call him one of the founding fathers of the brand. I mean, I suppose you could call him that. He was there with Dunn, Bate and Seven in the inaugural United Kingdom Championship tournament, so I suppose he could be looked upon as one of the founding fathers of NXT UK. But at the same time, please. Oliver Carter, for those who don't know, was making his NXT UK television debut. He has been in a few dark matches before this. Not that we saw them on TV, obviously. There is zero reaction for Oliver Carter here. He comes out to literal library silence. So, already a failed experiment for me. His vignette and promo on episode 57 clearly didn't get any interest. It didn't garner anyone to cheer for him. And this was a decent match. It wasn't great by any means. Joseph Connors does his usual shtick. There's nothing else about him. Carter, lovely springboard moonsault, lands on his feet. Connors uses the referee's distraction and a nice hair slam to regain control. I'll give him that. It's very mid-card. It's not the best debut you could have imagined for someone. There's a nice Kurt Hennig roll-through inverted neck snap by Joseph Connors, only he does it backwards. It's at this point it starts to drag a little. There's a top rope Meteora from Carter. He then reverses Connors' Michinoku driver, lands on his feet. Connors counters a lion salt and hits Don't Look Down for the win. Yes, they actually built up Oliver Carter's debut just to job him to Joseph Connors. It was absolutely pointless building him up for a loss in his debut. You might as well not have done the vignette last week. Just threw him out there and let Joseph Connors go to town, because this did nothing for Connors, it did nothing for Carter. And for me, Oliver Carter's got a long way to go now before he means anything in NXT UK. There are quite a few adverts and match graphics for TakeOver Cardiff. We get a WWE.com exclusive, which is the same one they posted on Twitter before the episode went out, of Cesaro announcing that he will be in Cardiff, which he was. Excellent match with Ilya Dragunov, I have to say. Do check that one out if you've not seen it already. The main event of this episode, Kenny Williams versus Jordan Devlin. Now, for as good as this match was, the one major fault I have of this is the start-stop booking of Jordan Devlin. A few weeks ago, against Imperium and Alexander Wolf, he was a babyface. He seemed to be making the slow transition from despicable, despised heel to a babyface you could get behind. It was almost like the slow transition Steve Austin took from heel to face. And yet here it was gone. They'd reverted him back to the old Jordan Devlin, the coward, the Irishman you despise. Williams showed fire and determination here. Lovely back body drop, clothesline over the top rope. There was some character to Kenny Williams in this match. Something you can actually get behind. Something that, when you look at it, if they put the machine behind him, there's something there. But as we'll see later on, they just don't bother doing that. Devlin tries to walk away. Williams brings him back. Again, the entire babyface character just gone. What a pointless endeavour this was. And I feel robbed investing my time in the fact that Jordan Devlin could have been a great babyface, because as a heel, he's now treading water badly. There's nothing he can do as a major heel anymore. This guy needs to be a babyface. There's no two ways about it. Devlin drives Williams into the apron gut first, slams him over the barrier. A jumping shoulder breaker by Devlin looks great. However, I will point out at this point in the match, this is the third time we've seen this in just under a year. So things are now starting to slowly repeat themselves for no apparent reason other than they need to fill a spot. Devlin's torture rack and penalty kick fires Williams up. Williams hits 2 penalty kicks of his own to the front and back. Springsteen McQueen, wrecking ball drop kick, lovely suicide dive because now every match has to have one. Williams blocks a Spanish fly to the floor, the same move that beat Travis Banks in Coventry. He hits 2 huge back elbows, but Jordan Devlin turns a wheelbarrow roll into a half Nelson German, which looks superb. That gets "You Kill Kenny" chance. And then he turns a rebound lariat into a standing Spanish fly. From there, Williams hits a wonderful springboard Hurricane Rana from the top rope. Devlin counters a headlock driver into the post, nails a lovely moonsault for a near fall, and finishes him off with the Devlin side. Now, this is the way you book both men. It was a main event match, so it made sense that Jordan Devlin would take some punishment and Kenny Williams would get some decent offense in. If this had been a 5-minute mid-card match, I would have complained about the amount Kenny Williams got in, because you don't treat a man like Jordan Devlin like a patsy. But both men rose to the occasion. There was some high flying, there was some nice technical work, everything made sense, and I wish we could see more of this Jordan Devlin, because what's to come just isn't good at all. Now, that was the main event, but the episode did not finish there. We got a highlight video of Walter's reign as WWE United Kingdom Champion. That began in New York and took in the feud with British Strong Style over the summer. After that, the last segment on this show was the grizzled young veterans coming out to complain that Johnny Saint had made their match in Cardiff a triple threat match with Gallus and South Wales Subculture. This led to a 3-way brawl between all 3 teams as the episode went off of the air. Episode 58 was a decent episode. There was some decent in-ring action, even though you could probably skip the first 2 matches and go straight to the main event. NXT UK episode 59 begins with me with a very dry mouth, actually. So if you hear me take a drink in the middle of this, then don't be surprised. This, surprisingly, was the shortest episode of NXT UK thus far. This clocked in at 35 minutes and 39 seconds, which was a welcome relief, really. It got the job done, it got the matches out that it needed to get out, it showed you what it needed to show you. It was a placeholder episode, as we will see. We began with a video recap of TakeOver Cardiff, and before we start, I must also add that this episode 59 was the first show from Cardiff and was also taped before TakeOver. I was in the audience for these matches. So a video recap of TakeOver leads to some still pictures of South Wales subculture winning the NXT UK Tag Team Championships. We saw some pictures of Dave Mastiff and Joe Coffey, Kaylee Ray winning the Women's Championship, Walter, and then finally British Strong Style helping Tyler Bate out of the ring after TakeOver went off of the air. We are told we will see exclusive behind the scenes footage from the event tonight. Do not get your hopes up. Piper Niven versus Rhea Ripley was the first match on the card, and I have to say this looked better live than it did on television. I don't quite know what was wrong with both women. Rhea Ripley looked smoking hot, as usual. I mean, this woman has developed into something very, very special. And that's me talking with my head, obviously. Which one, I will not tell you. I'll let you make your own mind upon that. Both women just seemed a little bit off here. I know people will say, oh, this was a great match, and it was certainly better than their effort at the Download Festival. But for me, it lacked drama, it lacked some intensity, and most of the time, they looked like they were just going through the motions. Niven more than Ripley, I have to say. There was some stuff here that Piper Niven did. She sold her back, not that convincingly. More effort could have been put into it. And her slaps, if you go back and watch this match, which I suggest you do because it's a decent little outing. But when Piper Niven is slapping Rhea Ripley, it's almost just like she's tickling her. It's just like, nah, have that. And I'm not sure whether the fact that she wasn't on the TakeOver card itself got to her, but she certainly didn't put in her best effort here. Rhea Ripley dominated most of this match. She worked over the back using the turnbuckle to her advantage, applied a nice Steiner recliner, which we haven't seen for quite a while. Unless you watch Scott Steiner elsewhere, I'm assuming he still does it. I haven't seen him wrestle since 2003. Rhea Ripley puts on the inverted cloverleaf, which looks great, punishes the back even further. Niven reverses that into a knee bar. Hits a cannonball and Vader bomb, which again, both lack urgency for me. She needed to be a little more serious about it. You know, she's in jeopardy, her back's hurt, Rhea Ripley will beat her if she doesn't fight back, and it's very lethargic from Piper Niven, unusually. Niven tries for the slam, but her back gives out. Ripley hits a nice big boot, and then counters a Piper driver, and hits a sit-out Riptide for the victory. We're 1-1 in this feud now. However, with Rhea Ripley turning babyface by the week, she is on NXT now. She's a babyface in America. She's slowly turning into a babyface in the United Kingdom. The crowd reaction to her is absolutely extraordinary. And there is more of Rhea Ripley to come and her slow turn. They do tease a third match, a rubber match, as we're locked at 1-1. But unless they're willing to put in more effort than they did here, and than they did at Download Festival, then I don't think I'm very interested in seeing it. Radzi is backstage with Sid Scala, and they both look glum. They both look like two virgins who have turned up for a date and found that the dead cert they hoped would take them home and, like Fred Flintstone, make their bedrock, just didn't bother turning up. Radzi alludes to some bad news that Sid Scala has concerning tonight's main event, which should be Cassius Ohno versus Jack Gallagher. And Scala says that Gallagher isn't cleared to compete tonight. They will find a suitable replacement for the main event. Again, do not get your hopes up. Cassius Ohno then interrupts Sid Scala, saying that he has the wrestling genius in his main event and he doesn't have an opponent for him. He eggs on Sid Scala and teases him that he's dropping the ball. And then says, you better find him an opponent because he'd hate for him to have to forfeit his main event. Johnny Saint then enters the picture. Yes, he is alive, ladies and gentlemen. He whispers into Sid Scala's ear, and then Sid Scala dashes away, and Saint tells us that Ono will have an opponent tonight, as if we couldn't see what was coming a mile off. We are shown our first of several exclusive looks behind the scenes at NXT UK TakeOver Cardiff. Grizzled young veterans are walking through the backstage area after their match. Zach Gibson is moaning and bitching that they lost the tag team titles as usual. They get to Johnny Saint's office. They ask him for a rematch 2-on-2, and he says he'll think about it. Gibson slams his bottle to the floor and walks away, but there is a lovely moment here with James Drake, who just stands there and repeats, "Think about it." And there's just something about the way he delivers it and the look on his face. This isn't really an exclusive. This could have been done at absolutely any time in the present, if you get my drift. We get highlights from TakeOver Cardiff to a dramatic score. I thought this would turn out to be a lovely little highlight video. It turns out it was an advert for the WWE Network. The second of our exclusive looks behind the scenes at TakeOver Cardiff sees Gallus backstage moments after Joe Coffey's last man standing match with Dave Mastiff. Coffey is leaning against a medical bed. He seems to be injured. He's clutching his ribs. He tells them that the Gallus boys are on top. He's the last man standing, and then Wolfgang calls for a medic. We then switch to number 3, with Dave Mastiff coming through the curtain following his last man standing match with Joe Coffey. He is accompanied by the Hunt, who are still one of my favourite teams in NXT UK. I don't care if they're jobbers. I very much would like to see Mike Hitchman get a massive singles push. Even if he's crushed by Walter or whoever the champion is when he gets there, I think Mike Hitchman in the title picture would be amazing. In fact, let's get that hashtag trending. Wild Boar for Champion 2020. Mastiff collapses down onto a crate, and then Primate tries to rile him up by telling him he can do it, and Mastiff says he knows he'll get him. And I hope not. I really hope this feud has ended now. If you listen to our TakeOver Cardiff post show, it wasn't the greatest match on the card. There was some nice stuff in it. The ending I thought was very good. I know good friend of the channel, Rocky, who designs all our logos. He designed this logo. He designed the Hall of Fame logo, the Tenant Talks logo, Logan's Future of Wrestling logo, the alternative logo. So if you want a logo, hit Rocky up on Twitter at RockyBaye. Hope I've pronounced that right, Rocky. Apologies if not. But this feud has very much come to an end now, and to have Dave Mastiff come out and say he'll get him, it makes you shudder that they could actually continue with this. They really could. We're shown highlights of Kaylee Ray winning the NXT UK Women's Championship. And then, thankfully, our last peek behind the scenes at TakeOver Cardiff sees Tyler Bate sitting down post-match, exhausted, tired, absolutely fucked. And then Trent Seven telling him it was an incredible match, not to beat himself up about it, and the pair hug. We then get a video package of Tegan Knox and a graphic that tells us she will be in action next week, making her NXT UK debut. The main event of this was Cassius Ohno versus Sid Scala, Scala being the stand-in and replacement for Jack Gallagher. However, I will say that unless you watch 205 Live, excuse me, and keep up with the wrestling news, then you wouldn't have known that Jack Gallagher was injured at all, because it actually wasn't explained. All we got was Sid Scala telling us that Gallagher wasn't medically cleared. Now, I do believe he was dealing with an injury they didn't want to risk him with, but that could have been elaborated on more. It wasn't. As it was, we got Scala as a replacement. Not many people really gave this much of a chance. I thought it was decent. It was decent for what they could do. for what Cassius Ohno could do with a smaller man, for what Scala could do with a much bigger man. And I applaud them both. Even more so, I applaud NXT UK for keeping this rivalry interesting and keeping it going, because it doesn't end here. The match is basically Cassius Ohno mocking Sid Scala for most of it. He treats him like a punch bag. He tears off his shirt, throws him around the ring by it, ties it to his ankles, throws him around the ring again. It's basically a wrestling playground, and Cassius Ohno is the bully, and it's a great character for him to play. Scala does get some licks in. He escapes some holds. He slithers here, through the ropes, through Ohno's legs. He keeps on the move. Lovely little sunset flip for a near fall that pops the crowd. He turns a single leg Boston Crab into a wheelbarrow pin, which no one saw coming. Nice neck breaker over the top rope, but then his luck runs out. He vaults over the top turnbuckle to the outside, which looks very, very nice. But Ohno counters with a botched spear. It doesn't look good, that moment. It really doesn't. And then Ohno counters a tornado DDT into a shin breaker and hits the Dream Crusher for the victory. I would recommend episode 60 of NXT UK to anyone listening to this. It's 2 matches, basically. Both are entertaining enough. I would have said the last is more entertaining than the women's match. But if you're a fan of Rhea Ripley, then she has to be seen to be believed, because she is super, super sexy during this episode. You can skip the middle stuff. Just watch the 2 matches. They're 15 minutes and 50 seconds combined. I do time these things for the upcoming book. So that means that at least half of this episode is actually filled with professional wrestling. So you cannot grumble on that. NXT UK episode 60 began with Imperium making their way to the ring to address the NXT UK universe. I personally think anything wrestling related that has universe on the end of it now should be abolished, including universe mode in the WWE 2K games, which is as boring as hell. However, I will say I do like the sound of the Union Smack universe. You may see that on a t-shirt in the not too distant future. The basic premise of the Imperium promo was to tell us that they had done away with Pete Dunne and Trent Seven and Tyler Bate. They'd killed British Strong Style off, and we were now to accept that Imperium were our future. Now, a few months ago, I would have tore this to pieces. I would have rejected it. However, Imperium, and Walter specifically, have proven to be a great stand-in for British Strong Style. I will say it, I will put my hands up. Walter isn't as bad a champion as I thought he would be when he beat Pete Dunne. If you go all the way back to April or even March and listen to these Omnibus reviews, then you will hear me say that I didn't believe that Walter was going to be a great champion. But he's put on great match after great match. And don't get me wrong, he's no Pete Dunne. He never will be. But his championship reign has been nothing but a rousing success. Danny Jones and Harry Green interrupt the promo for an impromptu match with Fabian Eichner and Marcel Bartel. I say impromptu, this was a 3.5 minute squash. Imperium attack from the beginning. Barthel destroys Jones with the suplexes, relentless fists, a penalty kick. Eichner hurls him into the corner for a tag to Green. Green tries his best, but Barthel ducks an enziguri, and the pair hit a lovely wheelbarrow flying DDT combo, which actually is you have to see it to believe it. It's very, very well done. The double hangman drop kick. And then they finish off the jobbers with the Eurobomb, which is the new name for the flying elbow powerbomb finish that they've been doing since, I believe, since January, maybe even December. After the bout, Walter gets in. annihilates Jones with a strong lariat, the same one he beat Tyler Bate with at TakeOver at Cardiff. And as they pose, the fans chant, "You still suck." Sid Scala is back once again, but this time he is in the Performance Centre. Earlier this week, we're told. However, as this was all recorded over one night, this was recorded after the tapings in Cardiff and inserted into this episode. He speaks on his match with Cassius Ohno last week, and he says that Johnny Saint has requested the two have a rematch, only this time it will be fought under British Rounds rules. Now, for those who aren't familiar with the British Rounds match, then we will get some clarification on rules later on in this episode. Jordan Devlin versus Ashton Smith is a mysteriously annoying little match, because even though Ashton Smith is a jobber in NXT UK now, just like Tyson T-Bone and them, he means nothing to the brand. He means nothing to the fans. Yet they still continue to push him and give him so much offense against a man of Jordan Devlin's level and Jordan Devlin's caliber. In this match, it was mostly Ashton Smith, and I don't see why. You're trying to build Jordan Devlin to be one of the faces of NXT UK when Walter disappears or steps down as United Kingdom champion. And yet here, Smith got a flurry of punches in, clotheslines, drop kicks. He hits a nice variation of Ireland's Call, catches Jordan Devlin off of a diving crossbody, and then proceeds to repeat the spot that Adam Cole and Ricochet had at an NXT takeover last year, where Jordan Devlin comes off the rope with a moonsault, and Ashton Smith just catches him with a super kick, dead on the chin, straight on the jaw. It looked amazing. However, my main gripe with it is that it was wasted. It was wasted in a meaningless television match, when it could have been saved for Jordan Devlin's next takeover match. Because if that happens again, then it's not going to have the effect that they want it to, or the effect that it had here, because it did actually pop the crowd. It was very nicely done. Devlin looked like he was struggling in this, which he should never do. Jordan Devlin, or men like Jordan Devlin, and that goes for others like Alexander Wolf and Zach Gibson, etc., should never look like they're struggling in enhancement matches. Enhancement talent should always get a punch or two in, so it's not just a squash. But this was ridiculous. Devlin looked like several times that he was going to lose, and I was convinced that Ashton Smith would steal one. The only thing of note, or things I should say, that Jordan Devlin really got in were a nice top rope ping into Smith's face. That looked decent. He hit his usual springboard cutter, and he won this with the Devlin side. Now he's treading water. Jordan Devlin is treading water in NXT UK, and management just do not have anything else for him. So either take him off of television until you can reinvent his character, or you actually put some fucking effort into this and come up with something that makes him look like a star. Because right now, he looks like a mug. He's mixing with mid-level talent that is just not doing him any good. And Jordan Devlin should really be at the top of the card, challenging Walter for the championship. Him and Zach Gibson are both the face of this company, so start treating them with some respect. Radzi is backstage. Yes, Radzi strikes again. You just can't get rid of this fucking bloke. He's meant to be with Toni Storm, but Toni Storm hasn't shown up after her loss to Kaylee Ray at TakeOver Cardiff. They're going with the whole Toni Storm disappearance angle. They're repeating, I should say, what WWE did with The Undertaker coming into SummerSlam 94. Where is Toni Storm? Has anyone seen Toni Storm, etc.? Just as he's about to hand back to ringside, Nina Samuels pops in for a quick interview. She says he's dropping the ball because he's got a star here and a spotlight and he didn't request to interview her, etc., etc. She says she's the future of the NXT UK women's division, which she isn't yet. And that's that. The thing with Nina Samuels is that she talks a good game, but when she gets in the ring, it just all falls apart for her. She's had some instances where she's had some really good matches, But then big matches like her championship match against Toni Storm just do not click. There's just nothing about them. So I think she needs a good 3 or 4 months in the Performance Centre under the guidance of someone like Cassius Ohno. And let's see what she can do when she's got some new skills and a better grasp of the knowledge of professional wrestling, because she's been wrestling for 3 years now and it's still not coming across great. Next up, we had a short recap of the Cassius Ohno-Sid Scala feud, which included comments from past interviews, as well as last week's main event match. And this led into a lengthy little vignette for the British Rounds match, where William Regal, Nigel McGuinness, Robbie Brookside, and Johnny Saint all went through what a British Rounds match is, and went through the rules for a British Rounds match. If you're not familiar with a British Rounds match, or you've not seen the match yet that we are going to cover in episode 61 shortly, then it's basically the old style of professional wrestling that Britain made famous. It was all the rage on World of Sport wrestling in the 60s, 70s and 80s. The rules here are: there will be 6 3-minute rounds. The winner must gain either of these following: 2 pinfalls, 2 submissions, 1 knockout. Be ahead on falls at the end of the final round. And that's it, basically. So that is coming up in episode 61, which we shall cover very, very shortly. And next up was Tegan Knox versus Shax. Tegan Knox, of course, a Welsh girl. She got a massive welcome home chant by the Welsh faithful. And this was no longer than 30 seconds. This was a brutal kick to the face by Tegan Knox. She kicked her like she'd slept with her boyfriend. I'm not shitting you here. She booted her so hard in the face, I thought she would have took her nose off. There was a fall-away slam, and she hit her shiniest wizard for the victory. That was it. This match was done just to get Knox out there, just to get a good feeling on the show. And then Kaylee Ray comes out and blasts Tegan Knox for stealing her thunder at TakeOver. And instantly, Kaylee Ray has her first challenger. And we will see Kaylee Ray versus Tegan Knox on next month's NXT UK Omnibus. As if this show wasn't long enough. Not this show, of course. I mean, this show is long enough, don't get me wrong. But this episode of NXT, episode 60, felt like it had gone on forever. And we were ready for the end of it by the time Noam Dar sat down for a terrible looking press conference. He started off, sat behind a table, I should say. I'm tripping over my words now. He was sat behind a table in front of what WWE wanted us to believe was a room full of reporters. It wasn't. There was maximum 3 people in the room, and they piped in interviewer noise and crowd noise, so it sounded like there was a lot of people there. I can't even believe I've got to sit through this and describe it to you. It was horrendous. So Noam Dar starts off by looking glum and saying that he put on a man of the match performance at TakeOver Cardiff, but the last 2 weeks has been the worst of his life. And then he builds up and makes it sound like he's about to announce his retirement. And then he says, I'd like to officially announce that I'm simply the best. And you knew this was going to be hideous, because right at the very beginning, the camera focused on Noam Dar's face in such a way and such an angle that you knew this was going to attempt to be pure comedy. And it did attempt to be pure comedy, and 9 out of 10 times it fell flat on its arse. It was awful. So Noam Dar goes through some questions. Radzi, the moron that is Radzi, asked him... No, he didn't ask him. In fact, this is what Radzi said. Many people are talking about what's described as the greatest wrestling match of 2019, the tag team triple threat match at TakeOver Cardiff. Now, he delivered this like an absolute muppet. It sounded like Radzi was struggling to keep a straight face. He wanted to laugh. he was just like an overexcited child. That's my first gripe with that question. The second is the tag team match at Takeover Cardiff was very, very good indeed, don't get me wrong. But Tyler Bate versus Walter is clearly the match of 2019 so far, and all you AEW fucks, all you AEW marks can stay off of my timeline because I'm not even interested in what you've got to say. Canadian destroyers off of ladders is not professional wrestling. What Tyler Bate and Walter did at TakeOver Cardiff is professional wrestling. End of story. Now, this carried on, and it carried on, and it carried on until we heard Trent Seven's voice in the background. Camera pans around to Trent Seven. He's on the phone at the side, and this is where it started to get decent. Because Trent Seven said to whoever was on the phone, he said, "You won't believe this." And then he started to mock Noam Dar, and he asked Noam Dar if this was his own press conference. And when Noam Dar said yes, Trent Seven said, "That's a new realm of arrogance, that was wonderfully delivered." Noam Dar offered to get him a t-shirt because he was such a huge fan. Trent Seven's reactions here were marvellous. He has got a penance for comedy, Trent Seven, and he's got some great comedic timing as well that I want to see more of, because if they're not going to do anything serious with him for the next few months, then why not give us a bit of light relief with him? He can back it up in the ring. He's not going to be booked as this comedy character like Santino Marella was, but a bit of comedy to Trent Seven, it could take him a bit further in NXT UK, because right now he's the Tommy Dreamer of this brand. He's absolutely the Tommy Dreamer of this brand. Then Trent Seven's phone rings again, and he asks if he's allowed to take the call, which amused me greatly. He takes the call and he says it's Drake Maverick, and then he proceeds to say to Drake Maverick, it wasn't Drake Maverick, of course, he was making it up, but he proceeds to say to Drake Maverick that, "I know you didn't want him, and I don't want him either. Just have him back, I beg you." And you could hear the laughter from the crowd in the Motorpoint Arena who were watching this on the big screen. And it was just very, very well done. Noam Dar leaves the press conference after that, and then Trent Seven just berates the interviewers, Radzi especially, asking why they bothered to ask Noam Dar a question. The majority of this segment, awful. Absolutely awful. Don't go back and watch it. If you're going to go back and watch it, cut halfway in to where Trent Seven comes in, because that's where it gets really good. Trent Seven, flawless. The rest of this, utter garbage. There are better ways to initiate feuds. We could have done without this. Absolutely could have done without this. I'd have taken a run-in. I'd have taken Noam Dar just attacking Trent Seven backstage, because Trent Seven is one of the founding fathers of NXT UK, and Noam Dar needs a bigger target than Travis Banks. That would have made much better television than this utter pile of horseshit. After we're told that Dave Mastiff and Joe Coffey are not clear to compete in Cardiff, so we will not see them again until NXT UK reaches Brentwood, which actually is being filmed now as I speak. The main event of this show was South Wales Subculture versus Grizzled Young Veterans for the NXT UK Tag Team Championships. Now, I'm not going to spend too long covering this because it was a slight disappointment. I know there are fans of Andrews and Webster out there, and fans of Drake and Gibson out there who are going to go, "This was a great match." It was great in parts. It wasn't great from beginning to end like their triple threat in Cardiff was. This was very, very rushed. You could see it. They barely took any time to display the technical ability. It was just move, stop for 2 minutes, move. And it didn't suit the match at all. This should have been given 10 more minutes. It should have been given time to originate organically. But it didn't. It was just full of high spots. Jim Cornette, if he saw this match, would tear it down, tear it to shreds. And, rightly so in some parts. Some of the highlights here were a lovely poetry motion by James Drake to Flash Morgan Webster standing on the ropes. There was a very awkward moment following this, where Drake and Webster, they just stand and argue. And it looked like Mark Andrews should have took advantage of the distraction and made a comeback. But he doesn't. Mark Andrews I think he just lays there and lets James Drake and Flash Morgan Webster argue. And then it's almost like they've realised that no one's come to break it up. So then they just go into a little series on their own, and it looks really bad. If you watch this match, look out for that spot, because it looks absolutely awful. Lovely slingshot shoulder breaker by Grizzled Young Veterans and Mark Andrews. They work over the shoulder a tiny bit, but not nearly enough. By this point, you're starting to feel that, you're not going to get anything of proper quality from this, and you don't really. Webster rolls over Drake in the corner, hits a suicide dive on Gibson, facebuster to Gibson. Facebuster to Drake. Read your notes properly, Matt. Bicycle knee to Zach Gibson. The GYV hit a lovely Doomsday device. However, as we come into the last part of this match, there's no real story here. That's another thing the time could have been used for, the extra 10 minutes, to tell the story of Grizzled Young Veterans wanting their titles back. That didn't come through here. If you hadn't seen Cardiff, if you didn't know, because there was no recap video before this, if you didn't know why Grizzled Young Veterans were challenging for the Tag Team Championships, then you'd never know that they were the former champions wanting their titles back. Not only was there little mention of it on commentary, but like I said, there was no story being told here at all. It was just move to move to move to get the match over with. Very, very poor planning. Very poor planning. Mark Andrews hits a lovely reverse Rana from the top rope on James Drake. He counters the Helter Skelter into a stun dog, which Zach Gibson then counters back into Shankly Gates. And then there's some illogicalness here, because as Mark Andrews is about to tap out, Flash Morgan Webster climbs the top rope and breaks up Shankly Gate with Shadows Over Malice, his Swanton Bomb. Now, he does it onto Zach Gibson, who in turn is stood over Mark Andrews with his arm bent underneath, his own armpit. Now, if Flash Morgan Webster landed wrong, he would have broke Mark Andrews' arm, as well as breaking up the hold. And not only that, he took forever to climb the top rope. It was like Mark Andrews could have tapped out in that time, and Webster was just, lethargically climbing the rope like he had all the time in the world. He should have shot up there like a fucking dog with its arse on fire. The end came when Drake super kicks Zach Gibson by accident. Flash Morgan Webster hits the Eaton rifle on James Drake, and Mark Andrews pins him with Fall to Pieces. Full of timing issues here, full of just get it over with, which is a shame, because I'm convinced this is probably going to be Grizzled Young Veterans' swan song as a tag team. James Drake will struggle to make an impact in the singles market. Zach Gibson has to be pushed back to the top of the card as a single star now. There's nothing left for Grizzled Young Veterans in the tag team division. Gallus are South Wales Subculture's next opponents, so it just makes sense. Grizzled Young Veterans have had a great run, almost a year now. It's time for Zach Gibson to reclaim his throne and for them to do something meaningful with him. I don't think he'll ever transition into a babyface, but I am very interested in Zach Gibson versus Walter for the United Kingdom Championship. And that was episode 60 of NXT UK. I'm not going to recommend this to you. It was full of squash matches. It was very much the first proper episode of Cardiff's run of NXT UK shows. So it it was the building blocks. It suffered from enhancement matches. It suffered from a rushed main event. It suffered from a tedious Noam Dar press conference segment. But on the other hand, it did build the British round match. It gave Kaylee Ray her next big opponent, and it arguably pushed Zach Gibson back into singles competition, even if we won't see it for a few more weeks to come. So it wasn't hideous, it wasn't great, it sat somewhere in the middle, but I wouldn't recommend you go back and watch anything on this show, unless you're a massive South Wales subculture stan. We have reached almost the end of our NXT UK Omnibus review. Just this last episode to crack on with, so I will try and rattle through this as quickly as possible. I know you've all got homes to go to, work to do, lives to live, women to make love to. I don't know, men to cook dinner for, whatever your preference is. Don't give me stick for that. It's just a joke. Grow the fuck up. So, NXT UK, episode 61. Sorry, I've made myself laugh then. NXT UK, episode 61, begins with a recap of Sid Scala versus Cassius Ohno from 2 weeks ago, in preparation for their British rounds match. We get some more talking heads. Same talking heads, I should say, rather different things they're saying. Johnny Saint says he's really looking forward to watching it tonight. He thinks it's going to set a new precedent. He's hoping. William Regal says there's such a size difference, but Sid can use that to his advantage. Saint comes back and says that Sid Scala is going to have to really think. Talking of which, what did Sid Scala do to piss off Johnny Saint? What did Sid Scala do to this British legend that he's put him in the ring with Cassius Ohno again, this time for 18 minutes, to take another pasting? And then William Regal says it really is a David and Goliath story, but we all know what happened there. The first match of NXT UK episode 61 is Travis Banks versus Tyson T-Bone. This is just a filler, something to get Travis Banks back on track after TakeOver Cardiff. And Travis Banks does show some more aggression here. He shows a more heelish side. He goes straight after Tyson T-Bone. There's none of the babyface Travis Banks here. Flurry of corner moves, including a lovely seated drop kick. Tyson T-Bone rattles back with a nice tilt-a-whirl snake eyes. He works over the body with some punches. It's a basic exhibition, like I say. Banks hits a running knee, nice suicide dive, backwards coup de grace off the ropes. Tyson T-Bone counters the slice of heaven with a half and half suplex, which was very good, can't fault him on that. And Banks reverses a suplex into an inside cradle for a victory. Now, if you're trying to get an established star back on track after another heavy loss, after losing another feud, because Travis Banks versus Noam Dar isn't going to continue, then you need him to go over clean, you need him to go over strong, and you don't need him to take too much punishment. And he didn't take too much punishment in this match. T-Bone got a few shots in, but then T-Bone is bigger than Banks, so you'd probably expect that. However, he won this and looked like a fluke in doing so. Travis Banks should have won with the slice of heaven, or if he could have got T-Bone up for the Kiwi Crusher, pinned him clean in the ring. But he didn't. He didn't get the clean victory. It looked like a fluke, and it hasn't done anything for Travis Banks whatsoever. The cradle botched badly, and unless they're going to turn Banks heel, I really don't see why this wasn't booked as a clean victory. It's not as if Tyson T-Bone's going to lose anything. He's a no-one anyway. You could lump him into that list, and I believe I did, with Ashton Smith and Saxon Huxley, etc. He's a nobody in NXT UK, so losing clean, I don't see the problem. I really don't. And whoever booked this match needs a fucking heads testing. Hopefully this leads to a Travis Banks heel turn, but I would not bank on it. Radzi is backstage and he's expecting Toni Storm, who again hasn't arrived. There's been no sign of her, says Radzi, for 2 consecutive weeks. They've looked absolutely everywhere, etc, etc, etc. Now, before we move on with this interview, which was interrupted by Gallus, I have to say we're only 2 weeks into the Toni Storm has gone missing angle, and I'm already hating it. It's an absolutely pointless angle when Tony Storm is on Twitter, when Tony Storm is conversing with NXT UK stars on Twitter, when there's been pictures of her and Tyler Bate leaked on her social media accounts that they're, dating again. When she is posting on Twitter and Instagram her in Stardom and that she's going to take part in WXW and she's coming back to Progress. So everyone now looks like a fucking idiot because no one in NXT UK can seem to find her, and yet every wrestling fan in the world can put their finger on exactly where she's going to be on every day in her calendar. It makes absolutely no sense at all. If you're going to book this angle, then you keep Tony Storm at home for 2 or 3 months and then bring her back triumphantly. You don't create a story where she's gone missing because she can't bear to face that she lost to Kaylee Ray at TakeOver and build her up as she's so distraught, she's gone missing, etc., etc. And then she's on social media, snogging Tyler Bate and saying she's going to be at Progress, she's going to be in Stardom, she's going to be wrestling here and there and every fucking where. It makes you look like an absolute fool, and it makes Tony Storm look like a lazy bitch for not bothering to buy into this story and say, do you know what, I'll cancel a few dates if you pay me the money that I'm going to lose, and I will sell this storyline. We are well past the golden age of professional wrestling here, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, rant over, and Mark, Coffey and Wolfgang interrupt Radzi. Someone had to. They basically say that Tony Storm's time is over and they want a tag team championship shot against South Wales Subculture. That's the basic premise of this interview. I'm not going to go all through it because my voice is starting to crack and we're about to go over about 2 hours in length, and I know you're all very, very busy people. Rhea Ripley versus Debbie Keitel was the next match up, and Ripley just tore through her. Absolutely treated her like a rag doll, tossed her around, verbally abused her. Wonderfully, by the way. I mean, I can't praise Rhea Ripley enough. The fans love her. And she won with the Riptide. That was it. This couldn't have gone more than a minute and a bit. Total enhancement match. Ripley looked fantastic. And then she gets on the microphone and says that she wants the NXT UK Women's Championship back. Ripley versus Kaylee Ray is something I'd love to see. Ripley versus Kaylee Ray isn't something we're going to see, sadly. She is too busy in America now. However, she is a babyface. The audience have decided that for WWE and NXT UK. They absolutely love her. After this match, Ginny interrupted Rhea Ripley. She says that she belongs in the past. Her and Jazzy Gabert are the future of the industry and the future of NXT UK. And then Jazzy Gabert gets up on the apron. Rhea Ripley kicks her down. And Jazzy Gabert and Ginny skulk away. And Rhea Ripley stands challenging them to come back for a fight. Now, it looks like we're getting Rhea Ripley versus Ginny, or Rhea Ripley versus Jazzy Gabert, or Rhea Ripley versus them both. I'm all for this. I think Ginny and Jazzy Gabert have hideously faded away since they joined forces. They need something huge to get them back on track. I am slightly disappointed that the rivalry with Xia Brookside isn't going to continue, so Xia Brookside can get a clean victory over Ginny, but what can you do? Rhea Ripley will be treading water with this feud, but I do hope at some point she does capture the NXT Women's Championship, because she deserves much better than this, and she is growing as a performer and she is growing as a wrestler. You can absolutely see it. Next up on this episode of NXT UK, Trent Seven was walking through the parking lot and Noam Dar is standing there with a microphone. He announces that Trent Seven is a dafty. Trent Seven says, good one, sarcastically, etc. They go back and forth, and just like last week's press conference, the Noam Dar bits here are cringy and painful to sit through, but the Trent Seven parts are very well done indeed. Can't praise him enough for that. This ends with Noam Dar saying that British Strong Style is dead. R.I.P. BSS. And Trent Seven comes back to confront him. They get into a bit of a tussle, separated by officials, and it will, of course, end up in a one-on-one match, which we will get to on next month's NXT UK Omnibus. Next up here was, dear God, as if this Omnibus hasn't been long enough already, Joseph Connors versus Kenny Williams, and dear God almighty, what are you doing with Kenny Williams? Not only are you jobbing a debuting star in Oliver Carter to Joseph Connors a few episodes back, you're now jobbing Kenny Williams to a man who means nothing to NXT UK anymore, and I'm tired of saying it. I'm tired of hearing my own voice say that Joseph Connors means nothing to NXT UK, so I'm not going to bother. As for the match itself, Connors shows some aggression from the beginning. I'm really not interested in this bout. Honestly, this was a piss break for me. Short arm clothesline from the corner. Williams hits a nice bulldog into the corner. Joseph Connors reverses the next. Do you know what? I'm not even going to go through this. Because Joseph Connors is so boring, and we've been here for quite a while, that I actually don't want to review another Joseph Connors match this month, this year. So we're just not going to bother. We're going to move on, and that is the sound of me turning my paper. Connors wins with the Don't Look Down is the basic end of this match, and what's the point? Kenny Williams is back where he was last year, before the Amir Jordan tag team, before there's all the stuff with Noam Dar. They had the perfect opportunity to turn him heel at TakeOver, align him with Noam Dar, but they spunked that up the wall. And now he's back to square one. No one cares. He's an enhancement talent for the bigger stars. And that's Kenny Williams basically done in NXT UK now. We get highlights of Ilya Dragunov versus Cesaro at TakeOver. And then we get an exclusive interview from Cesaro in which he says Dragunov wasn't the challenger he was expecting, but he was the one who stood up and the one that actually brought it. And he says that he's going to keep watching him, which is, it's a big praise from someone like Cesaro. It's just a shame that Cesaro has gone back to doing jobs on Monday Night Raw, because what he showed at TakeOver Cardiff was the makings of an absolute superstar. We get another Oliver Carter vignette. It doesn't matter. He's been jobbed to Joseph Connors, so we don't give a shit about him. Kaylee Ray is backstage earlier in the day. She is asked about Tegan Nox's comments that she will take it on anytime, anywhere. And Kaylee Ray says that she's the new NXT UK Women's Champion, and 100% she will take her on anytime she wants, anywhere she wants. I am very much looking forward to seeing this match and reviewing it for you, because I think it's going to be a cracker. The main event on this episode of NXT UK was Ono Scala British Rounds match. And I'll be honest with you, not much happened for most of these rounds. So we're going to, skim over most of it, because it was basically headlocks, arm locks, wrist locks for the majority of the first two rounds. Sid Scala got in a nice sunset flip when he countered the backdrop in round 2. Cassius Ono got a near fall with a rolling elbow in round 3. And then when they broke for the 30-second rest period, he turned to his water boy, who was just this plain-faced moron they'd pulled out of college. And he shouted at him, "Great personality, kid." And it was a wonderful little moment. We'll pick up in round 4, 3 rounds to go. Ono uses his bullying tactics now to beat on a down Sid Scala. Scala can hardly walk. He's still recovering from the rolling elbow. Chops away at Sid, heavy slams, puts on a cravat, does some trash talking, and that's when round 4 breaks. Sid Scala is a punching bag with 6 minutes to go. Round 5, Ono mocks him, applies an abdominal stretch, loves that he's bullying him. He plays to the audience, gives a thumbs up to a heckle, which was very nice indeed. It all played into the character that didn't give a shit because he didn't think Sid Scala posed any threat to him. Then Sid Scala came back, headbutts to the groin and stomach, flying crossbody for a very near fall. He kept avoiding knee drops and then countered a standing senton with his knees, which looked great, and the time runs out just as Scala is building momentum. This is where the story starts to build, and where the story of Sid Scala's heroic rise comes into play. And it was very well done. In the last 9 minutes, this match was very, very well done, paced, and the story was told to perfection. Round 6, the final round starts. Sid Scala, he attacks Cassius Ohno in the corner, and he just wails away. 3 minutes to go. He needs a pinfall or a submission to level up, to keep himself from losing a second match. You feel for him. You really do, as he has to constantly come from underneath. And a year ago, who'd have thought would have been sitting here saying, you feel for Sid Scala. Ohno hits a Dream Crusher variant, but Scala gets up. The heart, and it's very inspiring to watch him come back and refuse to stay down. Scala counters a Rubik's Cube into a sunset roll for the near fall. Crucifix pin. He gets a backslide, but as the ref counts to 2, he goes to hit 3 and the time runs out. He was half a second away from levelling it up because Cassius Ohno was not kicking out. It was very, very well timed, very well executed. Like I said, a very, very well told story. And I would thoroughly recommend episode 61 just for that match alone. It harked back to the old days of British wrestling, to the days of Adrian Street, to the days of Finlay, to the days of Johnny Saint and Big Daddy Shirley Crabtree. And it was by far the best thing on the show. If you're going to watch 61, then go to the main event. There's not much else of quality here, but this is worth your time, especially if you don't know much about British wrestling history. And that's it. Finally, I hear you sigh. Thank you very, very much for joining me this week. I'm sure Travis will be back with us for next month's NXT UK Omnibus as we creep ever so slowly closer to Christmas. Do log on to our online shop, unionsmack.bigcartel.com, where you will be able to find the official Union Smack shirt, the official Hibiki TMD shirt, the official Reset Button shirt, Tenant Talk shirt, Union Smack Hall of Fame shirt, everything you could want. Do purchase one, support the product, support independent YouTubers, content creators, whatever you prefer to call us. Do stick with the channel. Tenant Talks will return with issue 3 in the coming weeks. The Union Smack Hall of Fame will return as Travis inducts Finlay. And join Travis and Colin for their new show, The Alternative, which takes a look at AEW's weekly product. They are 2 of the nicest men I know, and they deserve your support. So hop onto the channel, take a listen, leave a like, subscribe, thumbs up, whatever you want to do. I'm pretty sure 2 of them are the same things, but to hell with it. And also stay with the channel for all the latest in retro gaming, retro reviews, Hibiki Quickie, Hibiki Live, Hibiki High Spots, Terry Plays, and there may even be a Hibiki Halloween on the way, who knows. He's got all sorts of things in the pipeline. So all that's left for me to say is thank you so very much for joining me again. It's another month down, another 4 episodes of NXT UK down, and I will see you all in a few weeks on the next Tenant Talks. Until then, you can find me on Twitter at The Perfect Tenant. You can find Travis on Twitter at The Hibiki TMD. And in the words of the great man himself, cheerio, mate.